Today on the show, I have a great pleasure to welcome Steve Arora. Hi, Steve. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you here today. Steve, you're the former CEO of Axis Re. You have an amazing experience in financial services. You've spent 23 years in the industry, 11 years with Swiss Re, 7 with GE Capital. That's been a while.
Yeah, and I've had the pleasure to work for three great companies. You mentioned two of them and also Axis for the last 5 years.
And not only that, but you're also World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. So I'd like to know later what that means and what that entails. Of course, you have an incredible educational background. You were at the Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I understand that one of your favorite hobbies is hiking. So whereabouts do you hike normally?
Nowadays, mostly in the Engadine in Switzerland, in the Alps here. Anywhere there's a trail, I enjoy myself.
What's the sweet spot for hiking? How long a hike do you do normally?
Well, I have kids, so if I'm with them, it usually entails some sort of incentive like ice cream or a schnitzel or something. So we're pretty limited in how much we can do before lunch and how much afterwards. But if I'm on my own, a really perfect day for me is to go out for the full day.
Especially in Switzerland, it's really awesome to go hiking there. I understand that you have a passion for cooking, but even more importantly, I think you have a twin brother, don't you?
I do. I have two brothers. One is an identical twin. We've had a lot of fun over the years being pretty close and occasionally playing games with people, but it's been good. And every time we meet somebody who doesn't know it, they're instantly very confused by the situation.
Do you have a little story for us, Steve, as one little game you played with your twin brother? If you can tell us that.
Nothing appropriate for the podcast. So over a beer.
Okay. Okay. Let's jump in right into the topic. How is the insurance industry at the moment? What do you think about it?
I think it's important to start with the state of the world. And it's a confusing time right now where we have a meaningful set of global issues. I mean, the first place to start is the economy. We have a mix of surging inflation, rising interest rates, unnaturally with a period of slow growth. We've had supply chain issues, volatility in the financial markets. Most people will predict that recessionary times are inevitable, where we have some weak fundamentals at play. So that's the economy. The next thing is just geopolitical environment. Clearly, we have an ongoing war. At the moment, there are rising tensions between many nations and just a general lack of cooperative leadership. So those two things, combined with other issues such as climate change, gender and racial inequality, which we've battled over the last couple of years, the tail end of a pandemic situation, and also a potential food and energy crisis, you take all these things together, and I'm particularly taking a critical lens, society is going to face these impacts. And when you're in the risk-taking business, like insurance or reinsurance, you could probably expect that the frequency of complex claims will likely continue.
For the end consumers, the clients, are we going to see the insurance price increase over the next few years?
The next step in the thought process is then what is the industry facing? And then when you add these two things together, we can answer that question. So in reinsurance particularly, there's been a very challenging period of 6 years of poor profitability. And that's mainly been driven by overcapitalization of supply. We're a classic supply and demand industry. And we've had a string or a frequency of nat cat events. We've had surprises such as COVID-19, and also maybe you could say the Russia-Ukraine war. And what this has led to is that the reinsurance community has generally provided a subsidy of earnings protection to clients. And this has broken the principle of mutualizing risk and profit. That's a very serious issue that needs to be dealt with. Where we are today is a very compelling moment and potentially a significant opportunity where post-Hurricane Ian, the market seems to have finally dislocated, where there's going to be a meaningful amount of capital that comes out, pricing will increase, and I think this gives us a real chance for strong returns. Now, there are unknowns. We talked about nat cat, climate, potentially continued surprises, But this is a very important moment for what's a very key industry in society.
After these 3 years of crisis and this war you described, can we actually bounce back? And what is the state there for the insurance industry overall?
Yes, when I look forward now in terms of the outlook, I think the number one responsibility for reinsurers is to restore performance, build back the respect and confidence that's needed, and only then will we earn the right to do more. Of course, there's many things we want to do in parallel, and we can talk about that, but that's priority number one. At the end of the day, we need to make the sector an attractive investment again, which it hasn't been over more than half a decade. I definitely think there will be a trend towards specificity of business model over historically what was a lot of generalization from many companies. You're going to see different business models, different capital providers, and different objectives as a result. But this is a defining moment, as we mentioned. Is the cycle alive or is it permanently dead? How long can you make a set of solid returns? And what is a insurable risk versus uninsurable risk? These are big questions, and I'm personally optimistic. We also have to continue to expand on the opportunity set. So there's an underinsurance problem that insurance and reinsurance can solve. Clearly, there's a need for innovation. Clients are looking for solutions through balance sheet protection or expertise from reinsurers, and technology is waiting to modernize the value chain. But all these things should be done. But step number one is restoring performance so we earn the right to be able to add more value.
You mentioned there is a need for innovation. Now, when we look around the industry, there is a lot of talks about innovation. Do you think there is as much innovation actually happening as it's talked about?
There's a huge opportunity. I mean, insurance and reinsurance is a sector that is screaming for disruption, but it's difficult. Mostly in the reinsurance space, you're covering a very complex set of exposures. It's not easy to come up with the kind of personal lines, automated underwriting engine. And it's a market that's built on relationships and large ticket transactions. So it's not particularly easy. I do think the headwinds that we faced as an industry has slowed down innovation, but there's a lot of exciting things that are happening from different companies and insurtechs, et cetera. But yes, there needs to be more that's done. So innovation and technology can play many different roles. First of all, our risk landscape changes. So the actual underlying risks that we protect are constantly evolving. So that's one thing that needs to be at the forefront of an underwriter's mind. But I've always encouraged my teams to think about technology and innovation as you walk top to bottom on the income statement. So is there something that we can implement that will increase sales? Is there something that will give us a sharper view of the loss ratio and reduce the loss ratio, or finally make us more efficient and reduce our cost base? That's, I think, what the key opportunity is. So everybody's probably going to adapt different innovations and technologies specific to their particular business model. But I agree that there's a lot more that can be done.
You mentioned increasing sales, innovation, technology. Is there any place in the insurance industry overall for the blockchain, for example? Or is that just a hype?
Hype's probably too strong of a word. I think the blockchain is certainly interesting technology. It's, as an observer, what I have found interesting is its lack of traction. My view is, at the end of the day, while the blockchain technology looks fairly complicated, it adds a lot of value in terms of trust and security of transactions. But to really get to a place where you can transact on the blockchain, you probably have to fundamentally redefine contracts and move to a model of smart contracts. We may ask ourselves the question, let's do it, because the market also is dealing with outdated contracts that should be modernized. But it's not so easy when you have so many market participants, you have intermediaries involved in transactions. And I think it's a big challenge to get the entire market to cooperate and move in a direction in a subscription market where you move and rewrite contracts. And I think that ultimately has been a big obstacle to move in that direction. So I think there's value in the blockchain. I think it's complicated to implement, but I am also curious to see if the blockchain technology will be superseded with something else in the future in the next coming years, but I don't know the answer to that. So time will tell.
Would you see a normal, obvious use case for the blockchain in insurance or reinsurance for that sake?
It's what I mentioned previously. If we can get to a point where transactions can be automated, we can link our claims payment to that particular process and technology, and we can move away from what's a fairly old-fashioned way of doing business, I think that's the opportunity. But there's been a lack of traction in that area. Ultimately, I think that's the opportunity.
If you look at artificial intelligence, the metaverse, is there any need for this? Is there a real case for that in the industry?
The metaverse is an interesting one. I'm sure there's going to be a space for the metaverse in terms of the way we meet, the way we collaborate, potentially complementing physical in-person industry conferences with something where you can meet virtually. But the metaverse is an interesting topic just more broadly outside of insurance and reinsurance. I think it's a space that's attracting a lot of capital and investment. It feels like it's going to happen, but there's some conflicts, I think, that are at play. So personally, I worry about mental health and people spending too much time, whether it's with VR goggles or with on the web, in a kind of artificial intelligence or a virtual world. Is that counterproductive to human interaction? Question mark. And I also know that the metaverse will consume a lot of energy to run and facilitate. And how is that contributing to all of our climate goals and clean energy, et cetera? So I think there's some big questions with the metaverse that need to be addressed. Given the amount of commitment, I think it's definitely going to happen in one way or the other. I think the reinsurance community will utilize the technology in the best way possible, but it's going to be an interesting movement to observe over the coming years.
Over the coming years, as you say, if you look at this technology we just talked about, the metaverse, AI, blockchain, is there a way to use these technologies or others to increase engagement with customers, with clients?
Yeah, but as I said before, step one is that partnerships need to be clarified and potentially redefined, because for a long period here, relationship has been a term that's been largely one way. And that's not meant to criticize the reinsurance clients or insurers. That's just been the market dynamics that have been at play. But now with the momentum shifting a little bit, I think step one will be to redefine those relationships. Let's also not forget that there's lots of opportunity between reinsurers and clients with sustainability solutions, ESG. Ultimately, as an industry, we are the ones that enable entrepreneurial ambitions to come alive. So we need to focus there, supporting new industries as an example. And clients will always need solution and large balance sheet protection. So those are the things that I think are the core of that conversation with clients. And of course, as technologies evolve, AI, metaverse, and other things will also define underlying risks that our insurers are providing to their end customers, which we need to engage with, and will also create a way for all of us to engage more effectively, more quickly in a virtual way with our clients, which can only mean good things. There's several steps here in this process that contribute to the overall partnership, and I remain optimistic, and engagement is going to be really important, not only at the upcoming renewals, but as we move forward in the coming years.
This will be quite a difficult question, but if we forget all the constraints, the relationship that is needed in the industry, in 5 years from now, everything is possible. How do you see it happen? Engagement with customers. What does it look like? What does the world of insurance and reinsurance look like?
I don't think 5 years from now, it's going to be so redefined and so different that we're going to be sitting back, listening to this podcast and saying, look at how old fashioned it was, the way we were communicating. I think the industry and society will continue to evolve and advance incrementally. I think our business will still maintain the fundamentals of relationship, of deep understanding of one another's company, of financial security, of relationship, etc. So I think those foundations don't go away. I'm hoping we're sitting here 5 years from now where we've said that we've had mutually beneficial relationships, that we're sitting here in a period of strong foundation, that everything has been rebuilt after a fairly difficult period over the last 6 years. And both sides of the equation are making solid returns and good profits. And we're adding a lot more value to society and hopefully interacting in a more advanced and sophisticated way. That's what would be success. But as there's a lot of pieces in there that need to be overcome. But to answer your question specifically, I don't think 5 years from now it's going to be the space age. I think we will incrementally evolve and develop, and we should be in a far better place.
So we're not going to go into the space age, but incrementally evolve. I think that sounds more reasonable. Now, we've talked about the industry, but I'd like to know about you, and especially your role. What is the life of the CEO of a reinsurer? What do you do the whole day?
Yeah, that's a great question. Life as a CEO, I think it can be thrilling if you love people. And if I just take my journey, so I grew up in the US and in an immigrant family, and you have the combination of an ambitious heritage of Indian people trying to succeed, growing up in a very ambitious and successful environment in the US. So it was like there was no other choice than saying, I want to be a CEO. That's how you're trained to think in that environment. And if you don't say that as what your aspiration is, you're almost perceived to be somebody, there's something wrong with you. What? You don't want to be super senior CEO? And not every culture thinks that way, but that's the culture that I was brought up in. And so that was always an aspiration. But what I realized as I started to know myself a little bit better and started maturing and reflecting is I still wanted to be a CEO, but for a completely different set of reasons. Because for me, I really enjoy interacting. I enjoy leading. To me, what's been the most rewarding part of my career is defining and driving a purpose, creating an environment that has strong sense of belonging, and really making colleagues feel like they matter. And that's what you can do and what you can achieve as a CEO. Now, a couple of things I've learned along the way is that there's an amazing power of alignment. So when you get everybody working towards the same common goal, and it's a cohesive group of people that are strongly committed, you can achieve anything. I also have realized that there's an amazing power in transparency. The role of a CEO almost is to bring certainty and to make people feel in a psychologically safe environment where they can deliver and they don't have to wonder about what if.
How do you bring certainty in such a volatile world as we have now?
Certainty can be defined in many different ways. What I'm referring to is just honesty and clarity in terms of where the company is, what are your resulting objectives, and taking the mystery out that people generally tend to focus on. And I think that it seems like a very difficult thing to do, but just think like very human interaction and regular communication is a really key driver there. So just being radically transparent, communicating often, doing it in a way that's not 100% corporate is great. And just to answer your question, what does a CEO do all day? It's running a business from end to end. So you're defining a vision, coming up with a resulting strategy, attracting talent, executing, managing the operations, obviously taking care of financial management, which is the end product of everything. I've enjoyed it throughout my career, and it's not for everyone, of course, and there are some challenges, but for me, it's been really rewarding.
How much of a workaholic are you?
It depends. I think I'm extremely balanced, but my family probably would have a different response. But it's very demanding, of course, both professionally and personally. And you always have a full plate. There are always fires that are burning. This expression about running on the hamster wheel is true for most people. And there's a huge time commitment and stress and anxiety that comes with it. The first thing I've learned over time is focus on what matters. And there's a difference between having impact and a lot of activity. It's really important to focus on very high impact opportunities. And what was unnatural for me is trying to shut out everything else, because you try to be available for everyone all the time. And if you do that, I don't think there's enough time to focus on what really matters. I think what's super critical is leading yourself. So before you can lead others. So self-care, health, defining boundaries for yourself. You said, how much of a workaholic am I? Well, I've always had what I think is pretty good set of boundaries. I know when I shut off every day. I tend to try and have a routine. At some point, I just can't work 24 hours a day. So I think everybody sets personal boundaries.
Nobody
I mean,
can
holidays
anyway.
are super important. Yeah, nobody can anyway. And maybe just the last thing to say on this topic is I think it's really important to develop strong emotional intelligence to manage the variety of situations. So knowing yourself through self-awareness, being able to control your emotions in highly stressful situations, like self-regulating. I think understanding someone else's needs through empathy is a key skill to have, and trying to have the social skills to find common ground. These are things that you learn over time and through life, but they need to be continuously developed because they really help in what can be highly stressful situations.
These are very broad range of abilities that are needed for such a job, apparently. When you start today, you say, wow, I have three main challenges. What are they?
Well, in reinsurance, I think one is the external conditions. You can have the best strategy, the best people, execute relentlessly, have a great culture and all the rest. But if you have the type of environment that we've had over the 6 years, it's really difficult to deliver on your expectations and plans. And that can be highly frustrating because you can do everything really positively, but a lot of it comes down to the external environment. Now, it's not that we all just run the business the same way and the external environment is the only thing that's driving your performance. Not at all. So that brings you to point number 2 is what type of portfolio are you constructing? Are you growing in the right places? Are you pulling back in the right places? And are you doing all the things that will give you a competitive edge? How are your relationships? What's your cost base look like? Are you able to retain and attract great teams? And these are differentiators, particularly portfolio construction. The interesting part about insurance and reinsurance is we're the only industry where you don't know your cost of goods sold. You take in the revenue, you have a prediction or an estimation of what you think your claims costs are going to be, but you never really know. And that's an intellectual challenge, but it also, you have to be super analytical about what type of portfolio you want to build. So I think number 2 would be around that, which is around all the competitive advantages. And third, particularly in the last environment, is keeping teams motivated as you prioritize quality over scale. So everyone in the industry, including myself, gets a buzz out of growing. But that's a very top line mentality. And what we get rewarded for in our industry is the bottom line. And so there are some times where you got to manage a cycle, make tough calls that are going to be a little bit unpopular. And you can't do that without the clear engagement and alignment and motivation from your teams. And as a leader, that was a big challenge that I think we handled extremely well. But you add that all together and you have the external environment, you have your competitive advantages and your portfolio objectives, and then it's keeping the team motivated, aligned, strong as you go through that phase. But when you go through an experience like that and you're successful, you become a much stronger and more complete leader.
And that starts, you said, with good people, the recruitment. Is it easy to get people now in the insurance industry?
We talk about war for talent, and I don't know a time in my career where we didn't talk about war for talent. So I don't want to say that it's over-profiled because it is difficult to attract and retain the best people. But ultimately, depending on any phase that you're in, people want to work for a winner. They want to work for leaders who demonstrate good human leadership behaviors, as we talked about beforehand. And they want to work in a culture that makes them feel like they matter and they're part of a team and that everybody's driving towards a particular goal or purpose. And I think if you can have a team of good leaders, you can develop a great culture, and you can have solid relationships, I think attracting talent is not easy, but it gives you a step up versus others that don't have those attributes.
Let's say, okay, for you, for your company, for your team, you attract the talent. Now you have the talent, you have great leaders. And now it comes to learning. So first, how do you learn and how do you think the industry or your company is learning overall? Is that satisfactory and how could it be improved if needed?
As I mentioned, the great thing about our industry is it's a huge intellectual challenge where you don't know your cost of goods sold. So that in itself is a constant learning. I don't know anybody in the industry that at the end of their career is not still trying to figure out the right formula and the right recipe for success. So that's a career-long exercise. I think secondly, another positive attribute of our industry is we're always supporting clients who are supporting technological developments and changes in the world and society. So by definition, you need to stay on top of current events and everything that's happening in the world. And that gives you a daily opportunity to understand and learn about new things. But then thirdly is it's all about surrounding yourself with the right people. Diversity of thought is super critical. And by the way, you get diversity of thought by getting gender diversity and different cultural backgrounds and different ethnicities and all the rest. So that's super important. But ultimately, what we want to do is surround ourselves with people that are different. So that's step one. Step two would be you have to listen. And from the time I started my career to now, I've become a much better listener. I learn constantly from my colleagues and my management team and my peers and bosses. I've learned the power of asking good questions. And there's so much to be gained by getting many different perspectives on a topic. You just need to have the self-confidence that it didn't all come from you and you're not branded as the hero. But ultimately, if you can take input from many sources and you have the execution skills to drive towards the right outcome, it's a really powerful combination. Those are some of the ways that I've learned, and it sounds simple, but getting diverse people around you and listening is one of the best ways.
I can only agree with you, Steve, on that one. And now I would like to touch on what makes it possible for you to learn, to interact with people, on your personality, on your background. Not a long time ago, I saw on your profile, you said you're recharging and getting inspired. That's what you're doing right now. What does that mean, actually?
Well, it's very rare to have a break. And I'm currently on a career break where I've been on garden leave for 5 months. And it's been a tremendous opportunity for me to refill my energy, to get different perspectives, and just to have a general timeout. It certainly was not something that, I could have told you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I'm going to have this 6-month career break. But now I would recommend anybody like every 10 years take 6 months off, something like that. It's been tremendous. But for me, I had a proper break for several weeks. I explored many different things outside of our industry. And then I started getting a little bit of clarity and thinking about my future. And now I have energy back in my mind and back in my body. So that's what I mean about recharging and getting inspired. But there's so much out there outside of insurance and reinsurance that's going to make such a huge impact in society going forward. Climate change being one, probably the most important and such a broad topic. But also what you realize when you engage outside the industry is how important the industry is to be an enabler for different things to happen and to make positive change. I think we are an industry that plays a huge role in society. We can add tremendous value. One thing I'm going to take away from this is how do I broaden the ways I feel like we can make impact? Clearly, we have the short-term objective to restore profitability in our industry. We talked about that earlier in the conversation, but there's a lot of different ways the industry can add value. But overall, my break has been excellent, and it's been a tremendous opportunity for me.
But Steve, aren't you going just through a midlife crisis?
Maybe. No, I think it's interesting because I've interacted with many people who have been highly successful, and I'm 45 years old. And what you realize is after almost 25 years on the hamster wheel, you don't even realize how potentially tired you are, in need of something to rest and recharge. But also, you have to always adapt yourself. And when you've had a successful career, you've given it your all, you've used certain formulas for success, and a timeout to reevaluate things and everything, I think, is important. So whether it's a midlife crisis, like a sports car or something else, I don't exactly know, but I think this is a really good time in one's life and one's career to transition from that first phase of accelerating, having vertical career growth, and all the fun and excitement that comes with that phase, to maybe a second phase in your career from now until the time that you retire. So for me, it's been well timed. And I'll let you know if it's a midlife crisis 4 or 5 years from now. But right now, it feels like it's a necessary break.
I think it's awesome. And that's why I really wanted to ask you this, because it's great to see now that you have leaders in the financial sector who dare taking some time off. One of our young colleagues, we introduced her to Eddie Schmidt, actually. She was so impressed. And she said, he's a nice person. He's a human being. I said, really? These C-level execs from big financial companies, they even have a heart. So that's good that you confirm this. So that you're World Economic Forum young global leader. What does that mean?
Technically, I'm an old global leader now because I graduated. I'm alumni. But this is a cohort of leaders, you can say, elected, appointed, nominated every year. And the World Economic Forum has a community, whether you are alumni or whether you're an active member, where you can engage in many different ways through various events, local communities, education modules, and just informal ways of people that are working on similar tasks. And it's a mix of politicians, athletes, social entrepreneurs, business entrepreneurs, actually some corporate executives. It's a very small population of the overall community. And it's been great. I was appointed in 2015. For me, it was like a 5-6 year journey, but I'm still very actively involved. So it feels no different. It's been a very positive thing for me. I've met very interesting people and have been able not only to develop a network, but to gain perspective and to get involved in many interesting things. I'm still honored to be a part of that community. And it's something that's kind of part of my professional journey now.
What a journey. And now we're coming to my last question for you for today. The little boy you were, who was dreaming of becoming a CEO, you've done it. You're a global leader. You came from an Indian immigrant family, studied in the US, so you're a success story. Can you tell us about, what would you say to the little boy you were when you were 5 years old? If you talk to yourself, what would you tell that little boy?
Oh, wow. I don't know. So I don't think I dreamed of being a CEO, but it was always programmed, if you will. So I think I wanted it, but it was just the environment that I was in. And on balance, I take that experience very positively. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot about different cultures. And I think my parents did a great job. And I'm very proud of the successes that the family has had. Of course, in that environment, it comes with some challenges. So you grow up in an area that has a lack of diversity. Maybe you struggle a little bit with sense of belonging. But on the other hand, it makes you develop strong interpersonal skills to survive in that environment. Both of my brothers and I are extroverts, and we developed strong interpersonal skills because we were probably trying to fit in that sort of environment. And that ultimately has been beneficial. And like my two other brothers are CEOs of companies. So on paper,
it runs in the family.
But then as you get more mature, you ask yourself the question, how do you define success? How do you define yourself? Are you defined by these titles and accomplishments, or is it something else? And I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to true self-confidence and self-awareness, where you feel if you've proven it to yourself or to somebody else, your parents or whoever it might be, that you feel like you can really ask and answer these questions and focus on other things. And I'm in a good place. I'm very proud of my upbringing. I think it taught me some good stuff. Obviously, there are some challenges that have made me stronger, but overall, I look back on it with very positive feelings.
One last thing. What would be the advice you would give to yourself, to the 5-year-old yourself?
Just have fun. And I think I did.
Just have
but
fun.
I've always been, have fun, follow your passions, and people will be successful as a result, that would be it.
And that's a beautiful word for our conclusion for today. Just have fun, follow your passion. Steve, thank you very much for your time. That was very exciting, interesting chatting with you. Thank you very much for this today. I wish you a wonderful rest of the week, and let's catch up in 5 years to see what happened.
Okay, great. Thank you again for the invitation.
All right. Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.